All right, we'll see how this little experiment goes. Welcome to the first live edition of the Brainstorm on YouTube, here on the 4 News Now YouTube channel. So we're going to see and kind of keep things testing here. And I gotta turn down my own monitor here. But we're going to see how this goes and, get some viewership. Maybe we'll do some of these a little bit more often. But we've got things happening right now that are going to be interesting in our weather. So wanted to kind of do this live and do this off the cuff, and we'll see how this goes. So let's talk about snowpack. Let's talk about this atmospheric river that's moving into our area. And basically all that means when I say atmospheric river is there's a lot of moisture, and it is all pointed towards us like a fire hose. In fact, if I zoom out here a little bit, or as far as we can see our radar out into the Pacific, and you can see, especially on the west side of the state, I mean, it's just coming in relentlessly. And we're going to end up with quite a bit of moisture for just 3 or 4 days. That is going to be pretty exceptional as this rain, and it is going to be mostly rain, continues to fall here around the Northwest in general. So let's fast forward here a few days. So this is going to be Wednesday night. So by Wednesday night, we're talking about forecast of basically everywhere in the yellow is over 2 inches, which is a considerable amount of rain on this side of the state of Washington. It's a considerable amount of rain for anywhere in Idaho, and really in the span of just about 48 hours or so. So this is a lot of wet weather that's coming down at once, and when that happens, there are consequences, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the night. There is some possibilities that we end up with some places seeing 3, 4, maybe even up to 5 inches, where you see those red colors in parts of the Bitterroot Mountains in Shoshone and Clearwater and Idaho counties. And all that water has to go somewhere. It is going to end up in our creeks and our streams and our rivers. And we're going to see some pretty spring-like river flows by the end of the week as a result of this. So there's already flood watches up, certainly for the Cascades, as they're going to get hammered, as you saw there. We're talking about some places getting well over 6 inches worth of moisture, and it is going to be basically all rain there as well. We'll talk about some reasons why in just a minute. But this is kind of the general outlook. So you've got flood watches over a considerable portion of the Northwest. That includes parts of the inland Northwest as well. So let's take a look a little bit closer. We've got a flood watch going until Friday. So what we're going to end up seeing here is, based on the river forecasts, the Coeur d'Alene River and the St. Joe River are both going to be very, very full, and we can end up getting in minor flood stage in both of these areas. I'm actually going to bring up right now these river forecasts, and this is from the River Forecast Center. So you'll notice this line here, and so what this line is the projected height of the river, and it goes right past this action stage at 31 feet, well into the minor stage here. This is the St. Joe River at St. Mary's. So to remind you where that is, here's St. Mary's, here's the St. Joe River. All of this water that's going to be falling here in the mountains all ends up going through the St. Mary's area before it gets into Lake Coeur d'Alene. If you're asking what this has to do with the snowpack, I'll tell you here in just a minute. We also have the Coeur d'Alene River at Cataldo. So there's Cataldo in between I-90 before you get up on 4th of July Pass as you're headed towards Kellogg. Large floodplain here as the Coeur d'Alene River snakes its way into Lake Coeur d'Alene and this other kind of southern branch of the lake. So you've got the 2 main feeders into the bottom of Lake Coeur d'Alene that are going to be seeing some flooding. And you notice here, getting up into minor flood stage, basically we're at kind of the 33 foot. So we're talking about a 10-foot rise in the river level. So that's pretty exceptional. That is a lot of water coming down all at once. And part of it is just the extreme amount of water that we are seeing over all of that space, all of those mountains, and how exceptional that 2 or 3 inches in any single storm event, even though it's spread out over 3-4 days, is for us. But also the fact that it's going to be rain falling on top of snow. And that's very significant because when rain falls on top of snow, it gets into all these little air pockets that are in the snow and basically lets all that warm temperature in with it above kind of that first crusty layer as that water sinks deeper and deeper into the snowpack. So when it rains on top of the snow, that snow starts to melt even faster than it's going to be melting because we're going to see temperatures in the 40s and 50s. So look what's going to happen here. And we're talking about not just part of the mountain, not just the lower slopes. We're talking about all of it in many areas, especially in Idaho. So watch what happens here. So our snow levels, they're already at about 3,000 feet here as we are talking live on Sunday night. They're going to be up to about 4,500 feet, so we're still going to see snow in places like Lookout Pass. And it's going to keep on rising through the day on Monday, and so by Tuesday, I expect the snow level to be at about 6,000 to 7,000 feet, if not higher, based on the computer simulations that we've seen and kind of knowing how these atmospheric rivers behave. It's very warm air that comes along for the ride. So what we're going to end up with is there's going to be a lot of mountains and a lot of mountain chains around here where it is going to be raining everywhere on top of them, and that's going to help exacerbate this snow melt process. So this is not an ideal situation, and we already, at least in some areas, don't have an ideal snowpack to begin with, and that's because really since early January, there hasn't been a whole lot of additions to the snowpack in many areas. Of course, it depends on where you are, and we're going to explore that a little bit right now. So let's take a look at, these are the classic snowpack maps. Everybody shows them, everybody uses them. So the higher the number is, the higher percentage of water in the snowpack. If you melted down all the snow, that's how much water you would get that would be going into all of our rivers and provide our water supply and keep everything nice and green and hydrated through the spring before we get to the dry months of the summer. So it doesn't look too bad, right? We're a little bit below the average. You can see the Northern Panhandle 86%, 94% around Lake Coeur d'Alene in the Spokane River Basin, Clearwater River Basin, all the way up to Lolo Pass and the Loxa River, 92%. We look in Washington, pretty similar. It's not exceptional snowpack, but it is okay. There are some places, however, if we take a closer look at the individual sites, the individual weather stations that are measuring the snowpack up there, where things don't look as rosy. And in fact, I had an email from Julie yesterday. Thank you, Julie, for this. You inspired me to do this, by the way. So what we ended up seeing here was around the Okanagan and in the Okanagan Basin, the lower Okanagan River Valley here, which snakes south from Canada and then goes through Okanagan County and eventually enters the Columbia. This snow basin here is not doing so hot. So I want to take a look at that. I've got a lot of ones that I want to show you here. Kind of a snapshot of the entire region. So this is Moses Mountain. Moses Mountain is on this map where you kind of see my hand circling. It's right here. So it's on the Colville Reservation. It's to the east of Lake Omak, to the east of the Omak area, south of Tenasket. So this is a reasonably high elevation mountain area. This is, about 5,000 feet. Well, look at this. Look what's been happening here in the north central mountains. The equivalent water in the snowpack, you can kind of see where things were we had a pretty rough November. We had a lot of these atmospheric river events. We weren't stacking up the snow very much. And then we're gaining all through December. December was fairly snowy. Early January was too. And here you go. Once we get past that first week of January, not much happens. And not much has been happening in this area. And so even though there is snow on the ground, at least up until this week, because you're going to see a lot of melting snow this week, in these kind of middle elevations between, say, 3,000 and 5,000 feet. What we're ending up seeing here is now where we were doing pretty decent with the snowpack here in the Okanagan Valley, in the Okanagan River Valley region here in late January. It's now the end of February, and it is not going so well. So, this is a place here in north central Washington where we need some good snow to come back in. And we are not seeing that as of yet. I want to, let's go back. Let's take a look at some place that is doing well. And one of the reasons why we are more worried about seeing all of that snowpack melt in places like the St. Joe River, like the Coeur d'Alene River, because those mountain snowpack areas have actually been doing pretty good this year. In fact, we were well above the average here at Lookout Pass through that big storm on the 9th of January after just a brutal start that everybody got off to, where ski season had to be delayed. But now, here we go. We're still gaining, but now we've kind of dipped to the bottom end of what's considered average. But that's still a very decent snowpack, and that means that there's a lot more to melt with this storm right now. But it also means that basically whatever melts off this week is going to immediately put us, even at the places that have been doing really well with snow through the month of February and the end of January, where we're going to end up into below average again. And remember, for the best summer conditions, for the best anti-drought conditions, we want to have this snowpack last as long as possible. We want the full meltdown to be somewhere in the end of June, at least get to the beginning of June. If we can get to the end of June, that's even better. But the earlier this melts off, the more that the vegetation starts to dry out, because as we head into the June and July, we get cut off from our moisture feed, and that will end up contributing to fire season. That's why I used to get, and still do get, questions all the time about snowpack and its relationship. Spring rain means a lot here as well, but keeping that snowpack through spring is pretty important too. Let's go to another place many of you are probably familiar with. Let's go to Schweitzer. Schweitzer, once again, you can kind of see the same pattern here. Doing pretty good, and then now kind of sitting in that below average, not super critical, but below average stage here. Now, the thing is, Schweitzer Basin, pretty high elevation here, and so we are going to end up with quite a bit of snow in the Selkirks. So there's some good news here because of the Selkirk Mountains' higher elevation, that we should still be able to be stacking up the snowpack pretty well. But you can just see the impact from the very dry weather that we have seen for weeks and weeks and weeks, where we're just getting little bumps, little baby storms, no big ones. This is a big one, but it's also bringing 6,000-7,000 foot snow levels. So we'll even see some melting snow here at Schweitzer, one of the higher elevation places in all of the inland Northwest, obviously not counting the high peaks of the North Cascades. If you want to look closer to Spokane, this is Quartz Peak, so this is the next mountain over from Mount Spokane. Look at what happened here. There was nothing going on in November. That one mega storm, January 7th to January 8th, and then just nothing. And these areas here are going to be totally in the rain zone and melting snow for the next 3-4 days. So unless something turns around later in March, which there's been some indications that might happen, this is kind of the story here, where we're getting this system, which, yeah, it's bringing a lot of moisture, and any moisture in general is great for, our drought situation that we have in the lower elevations. I know everybody who's doing any sort of farming is going to be really excited about the wet weather. But up in the high elevations, our water supply, our kind of insurance policy for summertime, is going to be melting away. And this is something that's happening more and more often, not just because atmospheric rivers come along and they bring in the warmer air. It's just in general, we're seeing warmer springtime temperatures, earlier snowpack melt off, and that just creates a cascade of impacts down the road. So it's another way that our climate is changing for the worse, for the drier, for the warmer, for the hotter in the inland northwest. Let's see. Okay, we got one more here. You can kind of see here, Moscow Mountain. For those of you on the Palouse, same story, where things were going really, really well, and then they weren't. So more mountain snow. I think, you know, we got a couple more, we got like 3-4 more weeks where we could get some, you know, valley type snows where it could still be cold enough if we get another outbreak of cold air. But really, for the next month and a half, what I'm going to be watching very closely is these mountain snow showers and where the snow level ends up sitting at and how much snow we can stack up here in the high elevations, because another early runoff is going to be less than ideal when we come around to July and August and September for many, many reasons. You know, we saw some of the algae blooms last summer, and that was part of not having any rain and, you know, having our snowpack kind of melt out pretty quickly. And when the snowpack melted, there was no rain to replace it because we hardly got any rain last spring. So everything kind of, all the chickens kind of come home to roost eventually, right? So we got to see what happens here over the next couple of months. I still have some optimism. Maybe that's me being hopelessly optimistic here. But I do have some optimism that we'll have a wet month of March, and hopefully the temperature profiles maybe will lean back towards cold at least for a couple of more weeks, and that will help us more than hurt us. One more thing about what's going on here with these atmospheric river systems. So rain on top of snow. You also are modifying the snowpack quite a bit in addition to melting it away. So no surprise here that there are avalanche warnings in the Cascades, and there are avalanche watches across western Montana and North Idaho. It's going to be some tricky snow conditions out there. So that's going to be something that we're going to be watching as well, as we see what is going to be I think a pretty interesting week of weather around the inland Northwest as a whole. And it's all because of these rising snow levels with this atmospheric river system, to where what would be beneficial heavy wet mountain snow is instead going to be rain. It's all going to run off within the matter of a couple of days. So yeah, the unfortunate kind of double-edged sword with these types of systems. And that is going to wrap it up. If you joined us live, thank you for doing so. This was pretty cool. I think we'll do it again. In the meantime, have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great week. Stay dry. We'll talk to you again soon.